Welcome to Kitty Knits, a vlog by Kate Heppel. Episode 7, 5 mistakes designers make and how to fix them. Hi guys, welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you're completely new. If you don't know me, my name's Kate. I'm the editor of Knit Now magazine here in the UK. I'm also a little bit of a designer, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. I do have a cat sitting underneath my tripod right now, so if you go suddenly tumbling down, that's why. Okay, so over the past couple of weeks I've had a lot of conversations with people about designing, about how hard it can be, how much fun it can be, but also, you know, things that we wish we could tell to new designers, to established designers even. This is sewing. Okay. Sorry, she just wanted fuss. This isn't very professional, is it? You stay? Okay. So I will say I'm coming at this from my perspective as an editor. But I'm also a knitter and I am a designer. Always feels weird when I say that. I feel like I'm going to talk about that later, feeling like a fraud, but I do. Number 1 mistake that designers make: ignoring pattern writing. Now I would say that I'm an editor. It's a big part of what I do is looking at how patterns are written, but it matters to knitters as well, and it matters to you and your sanity. So I'm not talking about, you know, whether you strictly follow a style guide, although that is also important. It's about thinking about how you're going to write the pattern before you even start. So you've got your swatch and you've maybe sketched out some ideas for the shape of what you want to knit, whether that's a garment or a hat or whatever. Think about how you're going to explain what you're going to do. Think about how you're going to grade the pattern. So if I looked at a design this week where the designer had produced a massive swatch of one size, which was beautiful, but it relied on certain proportions remaining the same throughout the sizes, and she hadn't considered how she was going to compensate for that. So she had a line that went from the central bust here down to the hip, which in her sample was about a 45-degree angle. Now in some sizes that's going to be less, in some sizes it's going to be more. She hadn't considered that, and she'd done so much work going into this swatch, but it could have all been for nothing if this isn't a design element that can be translated across sizes. And yeah, you do need those sizes. I would say these days you do, when you're writing garments at least, you need to be going up to those plus sizes, because every time I go out to a group of knitters, the only question I get every single time is, does your pattern include plus sizes? Does your magazine include plus sizes? And by plus I don't mean a UK 18, I mean like a UK 26, 28, 32. It's easy enough to go up to if you consider it from the start. And so that's in terms of grading, you need to be considering that from the start. But also, if you're not talking about garments, you still have to consider, I think, the clarity and readability of your pattern. So there are great easy tricks to make it so much simpler to write, to edit, to read, to knit. One of my favourites is using stitch markers, so that you're not writing, for example, row 1, knit 4, knit 2 together, knit 8, row 2, knit 3, knit together. So you write a row putting the pattern marker in, and then you write your increases and decreases relevant to that pattern marker. So you only have to give those instructions once. Your knitters feel like they're doing the same thing every row, and it's easier to edit. When you make something easier to edit, you are massively reducing the likelihood of errors, which everyone wants, right? Error-free patterns. I mean, completely error-free patterns forever, they don't exist because we're human beings and human beings make mistakes. But yeah. So that's point 1. Don't ignore pattern writing. Mistake number 2, skipping market research. Now, this is a tricky one because sometimes we ourselves are our target market, and that's brilliant because we know what we want, we know what we like, we know how we knit. But do you know how representative you are of the general market? I know I'm not. I am young, I read charts, I use circular needles, I love colour work. All of these things, very, very unusual at least in the UK market as a whole. And you don't need to do massive amounts of intense market research where you talk to thousands and thousands of people to find this out. Go to your local shop and talk to the people who work there. Ask them what patterns sell, what they would like to see more of, what they would like to see less of, because oh my days, people who work in yarn shops are so smart, so clever, so important to our community, and they are the people we should be listening to a lot more. Go to different knitting groups. You know your own knitting group, but the chances are you've fallen into a knitting group full of people like you. We all do it. There's nothing wrong with having done that, but expanding your horizons will make you a better designer. You'll find out things like how people who've never knit cables read a cable pattern, how people who don't like charts react to seeing charts in a pattern. All of these kinds of things are very, very useful. Actually, charts are a big part of that. I will share with you one little tidbit of research that we've done, which basically says that if you do a charts only pattern, you are completely shutting off at least a third of the audience. If you do a written only pattern, you don't lose anyone, because you might lose like 1%, because the number of people who can read charts but can't read written instructions is teeny tiny. The number of people who can read written instructions but can't read charts is huge. There's a load of people in the middle who want both, and if you at all can, provide both charted and written instructions for lace, cables, texture patterns, anything like that. And the easiest way to do that, and I know that this is an investment in money, but trust me, if you are serious about being a designer, it will be worth it. My recommendation is to invest in Stitch Mastery, which is a program you can use to draw your charts, and it also has a magic button that exports the written instructions for you once you've drawn your chart. So it's hardly any extra work to include those written instructions as well as the charts. I will say as well that in terms of knowing your market, know the breadth of the market. It's very, very easy to fall into the little Ravelry rabbit hole and think that Ravelry is representative of all knitters. It's not at all. It's representative of like less than 10% of the market. The kinds of patterns I sell on Ravelry compared to the kinds of patterns that I sell on Love Knitting are different. Ravelry really, really wants those complex patterns. Outside of Ravelry, people aren't as interested in that. The kinds of patterns where people say they love them in the magazine. Again, very different. Mistake number 3, not knitting other people's patterns. This one's a really, really simple one, and it's probably one that you're doing already, which is great, but read, knit, absorb, learn from other people's patterns. You don't always need to reinvent the wheel. We all know that there are some excellent ways to turn a heel on a sock. You don't need to design your own heel. Just use a standard one, it's fine. There are standard ways to add waist shaping, there are standard ways to write repeats and to display sizing information and all of these kinds of things, which again, it's about not reinventing the wheel, saving yourself some time, but also it will improve your pattern writing. Every single pattern I've ever knitted from, I've learned something from, and that still stands true today. And I will admit that this is something that I don't do enough of. I don't get enough time to knit other people's patterns, but I'm trying to make time. Because, like I say, learn something from every single person whose designs I knit from. So do it. Plus, you're supporting other members of the community, which is a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's an easy one. Number 4. This is a big one. It's not using an editor. And I know, I am an editor and but use an editor. Use a tech editor if you're self-publishing. And if you don't think you've got the money for a tech editor, number one, it's not as expensive as you think it might be, especially if your pattern's well written in the first place. You know, there are times when I've had hat patterns tech edited and it's cost me like a tenner, because it was a simple, straightforward hat pattern. And maybe start with that. So start with something simple so you can practice something easy, something that's cast on, work stitch pattern, cast off. Because even in that, you will be likely to be learning things that you can then use in your next pattern. If you don't have any money at all for a tech editor, for layout, for photography, for yarn even, submit to a magazine. Like I'm always open to new designers. I have a designer mailing list which is open to everyone, and I'll put the link down below. The door's open. And the same is probably true of other magazines in the UK and outside the UK, of online magazines. Head over to the Ravelry Designers Forum. Again, I'll put a link down below to that. That forum is packed with calls for submissions. So use us as editors. We want your patterns. We want to help you. I love finding a designer who hasn't been published anywhere else, who is a bit nervous maybe, and helping you. It's one of the best parts of my job, is being able to do that. And there are so many people who have published first with us and have gone on to brilliant things. So yeah, that door is open. So use a tech editor. If you don't have the funds, submit to a third-party publication. This takes us on to the 5th and final point, which is thinking you can't be a designer. You can be a designer. You might not be the world's most successful designer, but you can do something that you're proud of. It's about putting the work in, being professional about it, doing your research. Just do it. You can do it. And this is a very female thing, is that we think we're frauds. And we're not. If you are designing knitwear, you are a knitwear designer. That's it. You don't have to have sold a single pattern. You don't have to have been published. But if you are designing knitwear, you are a knitwear designer, you're not a fraud, you can do this, I promise you. Now, some people might find bits of it easier than others. Some people might strike on the right idea at the right time, whereas others might not. Fine. It's fine. You do you. You can do it. It's possible. It's so possible. It's more than possible. It's wonderful. And having that creative outlet is really like a fabulous thing to have in your life, I think. So, I think that's it. I've rambled for quite a long time and I'm going to find it quite difficult to edit this down to 10 minutes, I think. But, just a little bit of quick housekeeping. I am going to tweak how I do the channel. I'm going to separate out my reviews because a few people have said that they want to be able to search for them, and that's much easier if they're in a separate video rather than at the end of a video. So yarn crushes, and I'm going to start doing book reviews, are going to be separate from now on. A little small, do you want to say goodbye? So, bye. As ever, if you liked this video, click like. If you want to see more from me, click subscribe. If you want to chat about anything that I mentioned in this video, then you can leave a comment down below. Find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Ravelry. All of those links down below. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye. Say goodbye, Saren. Now, in the size she'd done, that was pretty much a 45-degree angle, but in larger sizes that's going to be a sharper angle. In smaller sizes it's going to be more acute. It's going to be